Plato's myths and why he used them. Plato, the towering figure of Western philosophy, didn't just present his profound and often complex ideas in the form of rigorous, logical arguments. He frequently wove them into captivating, often strange, and deeply moving myths. These aren't the myths of the old Greek gods, but rather his own philosophical narratives, deliberate stories crafted to illustrate, illuminate, and persuade. To truly grasp the breadth of Plato's genius, one has to appreciate the power and purpose behind these literary masterpieces, such as the famous allegory of the cave, the myth of and the story of Atlantis. Plato's myths and why he used them. Plato, the towering figure of Western philosophy, didn't just present his profound and often complex ideas in the form of rigorous, logical arguments. He frequently wove them into captivating, often strange, and deeply moving myths. These aren't the myths of the old Greek gods, but rather his own philosophical narratives, deliberate stories crafted to illustrate, illuminate, and persuade. To truly grasp the breadth of Plato's genius, one has to appreciate the power and purpose behind these literary masterpieces, such as the famous allegory of the cave, the myth of and the story of Atlantis. The limitations of pure logos, why logic alone wasn't enough. Plato's primary philosophical method, as demonstrated in his dialogues, was logos, rational, dialectical argument aiming for universal truth. Yet, he recognized that even the most meticulous logical proofs often hit a wall, particularly when dealing with the highest, most speculative, and most emotionally significant concepts: the nature of the soul, the reality of the forms, like the good or beauty, and the possibility of immortality. These ultimate truths often lay beyond the complete grasp of human, linear reasoning. This is where the myths, or mythi, stepped in. They served several crucial, interconnected functions. To bridge the epistemological gap, the realm of the forms, the ultimate reality, is described as being perceived by the soul's intellect, not the physical senses. Trying to explain the journey of the soul from the sensory, changing world to the eternal, unchanging forms through mere syllogisms can be sterile and ineffective. The myths provide a mental image, a dramatic, sensory-friendly analogy that the reader can experience and internalize, even if they can't fully prove it. The cave, for instance, isn't a proof of the forms, but a visceral, unforgettable metaphor for the pain and ecstasy of philosophical enlightenment. To address the unprovable, some of Plato's most important beliefs, particularly about what happens after death and the destiny of the soul, are fundamentally matters of faith informed by reason, not empirical knowledge. The myth of at the close of the Republic, describes the judgment of souls, reincarnation, and the process by which souls choose their next life before drinking from the river of forgetfulness. Plato doesn't claim this is historical fact. He uses the imaginative structure to give a compelling, moral vision of the cosmos, urging listeners to lead a just life, because its consequences extend far beyond their mortal existence. It is an imaginative hypothesis for ethical action. the pedagogical and psychological force. Beyond addressing the limits of logic, Plato masterfully used the myths as potent pedagogical tools to make his abstract philosophy accessible and memorable, appealing directly to the human spirit and emotions. Aids to memory and imagination. A story is far more sticky than a dry treatise. The striking imagery, the chained prisoners, the shadow-casting fire, the sun as the form of the good, the winged chariot of the soul in the myth of the charioteer, Phaedrus, embeds the philosophical lesson deep within the reader's memory and imagination. This allows the ideas to resonate long after the initial logical discussion has faded. Ethical and moral encouragement. The myths serve a deeply hortatory, exhorting or encouraging function. They are not just descriptive, they are prescriptive. The myth of powerfully argues for the absolute necessity of justice by showing its eternal rewards. The message is simple: live justly or suffer the eternal consequences described in the vivid, dramatic afterlife. They use the power of narrative to transform intellectual conviction into moral commitment. Appealing to the non-rational soul. Plato divides the soul into three parts: the rational, which seeks truth; the spirited, which seeks honor and courage; and the appetitive, which seeks physical desires. Pure logic primarily speaks to the rational part. However, a compelling narrative, like a myth, can engage the spirited part through its sense of drama and justice, and even guide the appetitive part by demonstrating the ultimate futility of earthly vices. The myths, therefore, are an attempt at achieving psychological harmony in the reader by addressing the entire soul, not just the intellect. The spectrum of Platonic myths. It's important to distinguish between the various types of narratives Plato employs, as they serve slightly different functions. 1. Eschatological myths, myths of the end times. These deal with the afterlife, the cosmos, and the judgment of souls. Example, the myth of the final part of the Gorgias. Their purpose is purely ethical and persuasive, encouraging virtue in this life. 2. Cosmological myths. These offer an imaginative account of the creation and structure of the universe,